Hello English 102 and Professor Frank. I am Trevor Sparrow, and my audience and camera lady tonight is my wife Michelle.
Hello.
Everyone else I know is at work right now, so my audience is very small. But anyways, my essay was about George R.R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire series, which is more commonly and widely known as Game of Thrones on HBO. And Game of Thrones, Song of Ice and Fire, is very big, many characters. But a lot of those characters are blurry. You're not sure if they're a hero, an anti-hero, or a good guy, or a bad guy. And what I want to talk about is, first of all discuss whether they are an anti-hero, or a hero, or nothing at all. Or, well, just that. And then, if that's like a reflection of our society at large today, do we still need heroes like we had back then, like Odysseus from Homer's Odyssey or anything like that? So, first, a hero and anti-hero. John Fitch defined them in his Archetypes on Screen article, that a hero is usually some kind of savior or someone who enacts positive change for a large group of people. And they usually possess positive traits such as like charity, or they're really moral, or they have a really good sense of justice. Then he goes on to say an anti-hero doesn't possess those traits. They're a flawed human being, just like you, just like everyone else, me. And that if they do something heroic, they're often very reluctant to do it. So the first character I'm going to talk about from Game of Thrones is Ned Stark. When we're first introduced to him at the beginning of Game of Thrones, he comes across, like this is going to be the main character. He's going to be the guy the story focuses on the whole time. Anyone who's read the books or watched the show knows that very quickly after that, that idea is just killed. It's axed. There's so many characters. And he also comes across very heroic seeming. He has a really strong sense of justice and morality. One of the first scenes we see him in, he's being forced to execute a man for deserting the army, basically. And he insists on doing it himself because he tells his younger son that a man who hides behind a paid executioner to do something like that will soon forget what death really means and feels like. So Ned ends up going down to the capital of Westeros, which is the main side of Game of Thrones here, and he becomes the Hand of the King, which is, kind of like the vice president or something like that. And while he's working there supporting the king, helping him rule the kingdom, he starts uncovering these plots about, the king's children and a lot of other things that are really dirty and corrupt. And he decides it's, as an honorable person, it's his job to try to bring that stuff to light. By trying to do that, he ends up causing a war where he's executed as a traitor, and this war just kills millions of people. Lots of people die from this war, and nothing good ever comes out of it. So he's kind of, he possesses the qualities of a hero, but really he didn't ever do anything heroic, so he's not a hero. And also he's not even an anti-hero because he did not, he didn't save anybody. No one was saved from him. Next up is Tyrion Lannister. The Lannisters in A Game of Thrones are kind of like the bad guys. You see them and you think they're all bad, they're all evil. Tyrion, he's a total opposite of Ned. He's a drunk, he has no morals, he lies, he cheats. He's a whoring little guy. He's a little guy, he's a dwarf. He's very small, and everyone hates him because he's small. Like it was his fault. They hate him because he's a dwarf. And because of that fact, he has to really rely on his wits to keep him out of trouble and survive, basically. And later in the story, after Ned is killed, Tyrion becomes the new Hand of the King, or Vice President, and he ends up being tasked with the defense of the capital of Westeros, King's Landing. And he's not sure what he's supposed to do with that at first, but he talks to some people. He ends up setting a really cunning trap for the army that's coming to attack and lay siege to King's Landing. So this army comes and he traps them, he cuts off the retreat, then he catapults, I guess what could only be called nowadays is something like napalm all over them. So he's burning all these people, he's just destroying the army, and they can't escape. So his wits, he uses those, he saves the city, but he doesn't get any credit for it. He's quickly pushed back down into, not insignificance, but just not given credit for what he did. So obviously he doesn't meet the requirements to be a stereotypical hero. He's not a good person, but he is an anti-hero. He does save the city, his king, everyone else, reluctantly, but he does it. So that's half the world right there. But George R. R. Martin's books are big, cover a lot of land. So right here, everything we've talked about so far takes place on this little area. Now there's another character who's very important to the story, and everything she does takes place over on this side of the world. And her name is Daenerys Targaryen in the story, or Dany for short, which is a lot easier to say, so we're going to stick to that. And Dany, she's basically a slave when we first meet her. She's sold into slavery. She's forced to marry a leader of a nomadic tribe of horse people, or people that ride horses. You know what I mean? And eventually she ends up taking over that because she finds 3 dragon eggs and they end up hatching for her. So with the help of the dragons, she becomes the ruler of this band of horse people, and she ends up taking over, or at least going through a lot of this area over here, conquering cities, and every city she goes to she frees slaves. But because of her dragons, there's a lot of death and destruction and really awful stuff that follows in her wake. So really, she's a good person. She has a really high sense of justice and morality, and she's going out of her way to save people. But because of her dragons, which she has to take responsibility for, she can't really be seen as a hero because of all the death that follows her. So she's not a hero, but I think she definitely fits the role of an anti-hero. So what all this means for our society at large today, I think, is that this represents a shift to where we don't value that old, stereotypical cowboy, John Wayne hero type person anymore. Anymore today, someone like that really macho, I'm the hero, I'm here to be moral and just and save the day, is kind of looked down on and frowned upon. But our society still needs heroes. There's always need for heroes, but our society today needs people like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who, he was a regular guy like us, but he stood up and fought against what the norm was at the time and helped start a movement that got equal rights for African Americans. And I think, George R. R. Martin's characters represent that shift in our society to where that's the kind of heroes we focus on and that we need nowadays. And I'm not sure how to do the works-cited thing, but I talked about John Fitch. He wrote an article called Archetypes on Screen, Odysseus, St. Paul, Christ and the American Cinematic Hero and Anti-Hero in the Journal of Religion and Film. And of course, the source is George R. R. Martin's The Song of Ice and Fire series.